Hello and welcome to another episode of Agile in Government. The last time we met, we covered some information regarding the UK government's website and how Agile has been represented and is definitely in demand over there. Today, we're going to talk about Agile in Government from the perspective of the US government. That's right. We're going to be taking a look at the documentation you see on the screen here. It's called the Agile Assessment Guide, and it's available at the gao.gov website. I'm going to put a link below so that you can take a look at the document. Cursory overview shows it's broken down into Chapter 1, Background, Chapter 2, Agile Adoption Challenges in the Federal Government and Actions Taken in Response, Chapter 3, Agile Adoption Best Practices, Chapter 4, Overview of Agile Execution and Controls, Chapter 5, Requirements Development and Management in Agile, Chapter 6, Agile and the Federal Contracting Process, Chapter 7, Agile and Program Monitoring and Control, Chapter 8, Agile Metrics, and then we have Appendix 1, Scope and Methodology, Appendix 2, Key Terms, Appendix 3, Related Terms, Appendix 4, Auditors, Key Questions and Effects, Appendix 5, Common Agile Frameworks. That's really what we're going to go into today. Appendix 6, Debunking Agile Myth. Appendix 7, Background for Case Studies and Agile in Action. Appendix 8, Specialists who help develop this guide. And Appendix 10, the GAO Context and Staff Acknowledgements. And today we're going to start right from the beginning, and then we're going to jump into the appendix because I know that's the meat lots of people want to get to. What are the frameworks? What are the methods? We're also going to talk at a high level about what Agile really is. So let's jump straight into our talk for today. Agile in Government. Welcome once again. If you've not taken a look at the UK government's representation that I put out a few weeks ago, you might want to check the channel to do that. So let's start off with Chapter 1, Agile Background and Mindset. First of all, the folks in the GAO committee that put this together tell you what their approach is. And they write, our approach to developing this guide was to ascertain best practices for Agile software development from leading practitioners and to develop standard criteria to determine the extent to which agency software development programs meet these practices. Now, before we go any further, in no way is Agile just regulated to software. Really want to clear that up because there's a reputation that Agile has to be loosey-goosey and all over the place and only used by software development cowboys. Well, I would like to correct that. Agile can be used in any industry. My firm has trained and coached organizations from various industries, all the way from fire safety equipment to oil and gas. My buddy Roy trains folks from all over the world in all sorts of organizations and entities, all the way up to the US Air Force. So Agile is not just for software. Agile can be used across the board. So let's get that out of the way. With that out of the way, let's take a look at the opener. The most well-known feature of Agile software development is probably its emphasis on iterative product development and delivery. That is, development of software in iterations that are being continuously evaluated on their functionality, quality, and customer satisfaction. This method is well suited for programs in which the final product is to include distinct features, some of which may be discovered during the process rather than planned at the beginning. And they go into Figure 1, showing you a comparison of Agile and Waterfall for developing software. Note the terms developing software. This is a comparison of software development, not necessarily managing software development as a project manager. Now we have the Agile model here: requirements, design, development, testing, and integration. Down here, we have the same items, but instead of this being done in iterations, as we can see in the Agile iterative demonstration here, this is done in phases. So what is the difference? In essence, the difference is, as opposed to doing things in phases across a timeline, you do things in smaller chunks, and in each of those iterations, you are doing all of those things, as you can see here. We're not doing one iteration is requirements, another iteration is design. No, that is not what we're doing. In the world of Agile, we're doing requirements design, development, testing, and integration so that at the end, we can get working software, as you can see on the screen here. We can get user feedback, and then we can move into the next iteration over and over again. In the world of waterfall software development, we have this done in phases. And those phases are done once. And at the end, we've got this big release, a one-time delivery. Now, the problem with that is you could have worked on a project for a duration of a year only to get to the final release. And you realize that time has moved on. There's been erosion of revenues. People are no longer interested in using what you've developed. Technology has moved on. Instead, think about doing things in an agile fashion so that you can get your ideas into the hands of the customer quicker, you can get value into the hands of the customer quicker, and you can begin to realize those benefits so that even if there's some sort of erosion in the future, you would have realized some of those benefits and you'll be able to appropriate those revenues into projects of relevance somewhere down the line. So what is the value of using Agile? The value of using Agile, with an emphasis on the early and continuous delivery of working software, Agile can be a valuable tool for mitigating risks by engaging customers in collaboration early in the program and continuously adapting to changing requirements and environment, thus limiting the chance of continuing to fund a failing program or, as I said, outdated technology. These days, there's some obsolescence built in, and before you know it, the software is no longer working as you thought. New systems are at play, new environments, and those things become obsolete. Perfect example is Flash. Flash is now obsolete, but a lot was put into it and a lot was gained from it. Now, anyone coming late in the day trying to use that tool will realize they will gain absolutely no profits from it because it cannot be used. Now, that's a rather extreme example. Let's take a look at other organizations such as the blockbusters of this world. And they are a perfect example about how if you're not agile, time moves on and you're left with a bag in hand without any money in it. You don't want that to be the case. Moving on to an Agile overview here. There are numerous approaches or frameworks available for Agile programs to use. A framework is a basic structure to guide customers rather than a prescriptive process. Each framework is unique and may have its own terminology for processes and artifacts, though the frameworks are not mutually exclusive and so can be combined. When implementing Agile in a federal environment, all staff, both government and contractor, will want to work together to define the Agile terms and processes that will be used for their particular program. Agile as a concept is not prescriptive. However, when applied to an organization, it may be. Regardless of the specific frameworks and practices, it is important that applying Agile aligns with the manifesto and Agile principles. A detailed description of commonly used Agile frameworks is located in Appendix 5, Table 1, provides high-level definition for several commonly used incremental development frameworks. So we'll begin to take a look at these. Now, before we go further, it is important for us to really establish what Agile is. Although Agile, first of all, started off in software development, Agile should not be relegated to software development practices. Instead, today, in today's business world, Agile is viewed as a way of responding to change in the way you think primarily. And secondarily, it permeates into principles that guide our behavior, values and principles that guide our behavior, and ultimately those taper into the practices that we are going to review today. But in no way should you think about Agile as being primarily practices. It is not. You can be Agile in your thinking, and you could be predictive in your delivery. In other words, you could think Agile and you could deliver predictively one time, or you could think Agile and deliver in an Agile fashion, which is frequent, smaller deliveries. Let's move into the timeline of Agile development. The timeline of Agile development shows in the 1950s to 1980s, Iterative software development was used occasionally in defense and space programs. In the 1990s, we saw Scrum, XP, DSDM. 2001 is when the Agile Manifesto was written. And between 2001 to present, we have a smattering of frameworks and methods: DevOps, Discipline Agile, Lean, software development. Most popular, of course, is Scrum. So we'll take a look at some of those very popular ones. Why don't we start off with the big method used in so many organizations? And when I say big, I don't mean in terms of weight, I just mean in terms of reach. Scrum has mammoth reach and is used across organizations, so many organizations worldwide. The last thing I heard about it, out of those organizations who say they use some form of Agile, 90% of them use some parts of Scrum or Scrum itself. It's the most widely used framework for Agile software development, and it seeks to address complex problems while delivering high-value products frequently and effectively. Originating from a 1986 Hirotaka Takuchi and Ikujiro Nonaka titled The New Product Development Game, the method was referred to as Scrum by Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland in the early 1990s to emphasize a holistic approach using multiple overlapping phases. Schwaber and Sutherland authored the Scrum Guide, which details the methodology. Scrum relies heavily on the concept of Scrum Teams that are responsible for producing working software in increments, often referred to as a sprint. Now, for those who have not dabbled a lot into the idea of Scrum, when you hear sprint, just think iteration. Same thing. Each sprint is a short time-boxed iteration that is intended to provide distinct, consistent, and incremental progress of prioritized software features. Still on Scrum, this framework is centered on Scrum Teams, where members fill specific roles and responsibilities. These members are responsible for various tasks, including developing Agile artifacts. Each team contains members that fit into one of these three main roles, and that is shown in Table 28. But at a high level, I'll tell you that the roles in Scrum are the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the team. The product owner is the intermediary between the development team and the business. The Scrum Master is responsible for the purity of the process of Scrum. And we have the development team, also known as the developers, sometimes casually referred to as the team. Those are the individuals doing the work. With Scrum, teams are self-organizing and choose how best to accomplish their work rather than being directed by management. Teams are also cross-functional, meaning they include members who have the capabilities to achieve the work without depending on someone outside the team. This model optimizes flexibility, creativity, and productivity, and seeks to eliminate the need for a traditional program manager or project manager, since each team supervises itself. During sprint planning meetings, the team determines the type of work to be done, prepares the sprint backlog, which is an ordered list of tasks to be accomplished during the sprint, and communicates expected responsibilities between team members. Teams meet daily during each sprint for a brief status update. Each sprint is intended to produce, among other things, completed increments of software features that are ultimately built into the final product solution. Now, there's a correction I would like to make. We need to be really careful when we use the word status, because when we use the word status, people think about readouts, and readout meetings are, in essence, valueless. Instead, we need to think about the daily Scrum as a planning meeting, as a meeting where we uncover impediments, as a meeting where we move the team forward, not just a status meeting. So I do want to correct that. For those of you more experienced Agilists, you will read this and you'll definitely have your own corrections to make. But it is nonetheless a great start at representing the information. Moving on, the sprint backlog is a subset of the most important features from the overall product backlog. Teams decompose these requirements into user stories that describe what the customer wants. The software developed during the sprint should satisfy those needs in order for a user to be considered complete, user story to be considered complete. A burn down chart is a public display of the remaining work in the sprint backlog. The team updates the burn down chart daily to keep everyone informed of the status of tasks. In this table, we can see the 3 pillars of Scrum: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. When we talk about transparency, a common standard and understanding must be shared in order for the process to be visible. For example, the definition of done documents a common definition between developers and product owners. We talk about inspection. Artifacts are frequently inspected to detect any issues, but this inspection should not get in the way of work. And lastly, adaptation. Adjustments should be made as soon as possible. Recurring events like sprint planning meetings and retrospectives provide additional refinements and updates. Now, these principles that we're looking at here, these ideas, they are all documented in the Scrum Guide. You can get that at scrumguides.org if you wanted to learn more about Scrum. Now, moving a little bit further, I will digress and deviate a little bit from these slides, which are from the GAO document, and instead I will go into a more visual presentation of Scrum that is not in that document, just to give you a very clear idea of how Scrum pans out. So here is a slide from our Agile for Practitioners course. I want to stress the 353 of Scrum because those of you new to it will find this framework to be helpful, this configuration that explains the framework. Scrum is built on a 353 framework. We have 3 roles, and they're over here: the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the team. We have 5 ceremonies, and the 5 ceremonies are those in the orange hue: sprint planning, the sprint itself, the daily Scrum, sprint review ceremony, and sprint retrospective. We have an informal ceremony known as backlog refinement. We have 3 artifacts: the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the PSI. Now, over time, Ken and Jeff have updated the Scrum Guide. And in one of the updates, they corrected the fact that the sprint could be anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks, as opposed to what it read previously, which was 1 to 3 weeks. So the sprint could be anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. That is a recent correction in the 2020 Scrum Guides edition. Wanted. In addition to this understanding of Scrum, you might want to check out Ken Schwaber's site, scrum.org. And on scrum.org, as you can see here, we have the Scrum values in this nice infographic. Let's go back to the GAO documentation. Going back to the GAO documentation, the final one we will discuss today is Scrumban. Scrumban combines both Scrum and Kanban, typically by using the Scrum team structure with Kanban process principles. Now, the question would be, what is Kanban? In order to understand Scrumban, you should know a bit about Kanban. So let's talk about Kanban and jump back into Scrumban, which is a combination of Scrum and Kanban. Kanban seeks to alleviate the bottlenecks in waterfall development by limiting in-progress work in order to efficiently and effectively design and deliver products to customers. Limiting work in progress prevents a team from committing to too much work. Since new work should not be started until the current work has been completed, bottlenecks blocking the completion of work should become more visible in the process. This framework focuses on the flow of work and was inspired by lean manufacturing. Kanban is still used in manufacturing as well as other applications. This section focuses on Kanban for software development. There are no prescribed roles in Kanban, allowing for maximum team flexibility so that members can work on each other's artifacts easily. Teams use a Kanban board to keep track of their work, which can be either physical or virtual. A Kanban board maintains a clear visual representation of the work through various stages of development. An example of a typical board is shown in figure 18. Let's go to figure 18. Here's figure 18. This is a Kanban board. Now, this is one of the more advanced Kanban boards, but we can see items that are pending. We have 5 items pending. We have 3 in analysis, 5 in development, 3 in test, and 1 ready for deploy. This is, as I said, a more complex view of Kanban. There's a much simpler view where you can break down work into 3 columns, as simple as what I'm about to put on the whiteboard. You could have 3 sections of items that are in the to-do section, items that you are currently working on, we'll call them doing, and items that are done. And this is the simplest of the Kanban boards: to do, doing, and done. You could start wherever you are in whichever type of process with Kanban. It has a start where you are mindset. Now, in Kanban, we have cards, and these cards could represent any kind of tasks. They could represent IT tickets, they could represent user stories, they could represent requirements. Now, as you begin to do these items, they move into the doing section. One of the key tenets of Kanban is to limit your WIP, limit your work in progress. The more stuff you have going on, the more likely you are to have bottlenecks, impediments, and the harder it is to actually get anything done. As you get things done, you move them into the done column. Your WIP is a factor of many things, including team size, prowess, the work itself. But this is a simple view to Kanban. What I showed you in figure 18 is a more complex view. And you could have many more states than this. And you could break down each state into 2. As you can see on the screen here, each state beyond pending has been broken into doing and done. Be aware of that. Now, going into a little bit more regarding the principles used in Kanban. A Kanban board displays work using sticky notes. The numbers at the top of each column are the limits on the number of work items allowed per column. As a task is complete, the related notes are physically moved to the next stage so that completed and remaining work can be seen. Having a board to review provides a summary of where the team needs to focus its efforts. Kanban is based on 3 principles, 3 basic principles. Visualize what you do today, workflows, limit the amount of work in progress, and focus on flow, backlog prioritization. These Kanban principles are intended to be responsive to changes that occur during a demonstration. Having a short cycle time helps ensure that customers provide feedback to the team on a regular basis, resulting in delivery of desired software features faster than traditional methods. And what we mean by cycle time is a time from when you pick the card to when you get it done. And having those short times encourages quicker feedback, and in turn, your customer is getting value fast. And that's one of the tenets of Agile. In addition, Kanban promotes having user stories that are all similar in size in order to limit work in progress so that it is both manageable and predictable. And that's an overview of Kanban. Now, the final thing to talk about today is the combination of Scrum and Kanban into what we call Scrumban. Scrumban combines both Scrum and Kanban, typically by using the Scrum team structure with Kanban process principles. Scrumban is seen as being more flexible than Scrum, but more structured than Kanban. You could call it the best of both worlds, if you will. Similar to Scrum, Scrumban uses iterative planning, requirements prioritization, and structured teams. From Kanban, Scrumban uses the pull system, work in progress limits, and work visualization, the Kanban board. Scrumban relies on the principles of Scrum and Kanban, as discussed previously. I hope you found this to be helpful. In our next episode, we'll go a little bit deeper into the Agile Assessment Guide. We'll take a look at DevOps and some other frameworks. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Don't forget to share with your friends. A lot more fun episodes coming from this awesome guide that was put together. Big shout out to my buddy Bob. We call him Scrum Bob, who first shared this assessment guide with me. And Scrum Bob was also part of the team that put this together. So Scrum Bob, huge shout out to you. Talk to you all later. Bye for now.